Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Connect Conversations. Today's conversation is all about planning and scheduling and is brought to you as a part of MOBIUS Connect's ongoing YouTube series, Connect Conversations. I'm Kim Puger, the manager of MOBIUS Connect, and I will be your moderator for this session. First, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the host of Connect Conversation series, global reliability improvement experts Doug Plucknette and Ron Moore. Well, before I pass the microphone over to you guys, I want to encourage the audience here today to submit any questions that you might have into the question panel on your GoToWebinar screen, and Ron and Doug will be more than happy to answer your questions throughout our time here today. Your questions will be answered anonymously, so no need to worry about getting called out directly. Doug and Ron are here to provide their advice and perspectives from their experiences and are here to help you. All right, Ron and Doug, I'm going to pass the presentation over to you.
Hey, everybody. It's, Connect Conversations with Ron and Doug. And today we're going to talk about planning and scheduling, or should I say planning, then scheduling, because they're quite different. And some people use them almost interchangeably, which is, well, at least in my view, is just wrong. Because planning relates to the work scope and scheduling relates to, literally the scheduling and the allocation of resources. So that's the topic for the day. And Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with you 100%. I know with some small companies that it is done as a one-person function, but anywhere where there's a group where you can have a planner, I'm the type of person that says you ought to have a scheduler. They should be two separate jobs. In fact, scheduler often really ought to come out of operations, in my opinion, but that way they're well in tune with what production schedule is, and then have to work the maintenance in and make sure all that fits together.
Yeah, and speaking of operations, one of my very strong opinions, and feel free to disagree, is that every site should have one plan. It's called a production plan, and it includes the maintenance plan. And production and maintenance are both held accountable for its completion. And that way, when you run into conflict about doing production or doing maintenance, you minimize the amount of finger pointing, because they're both held accountable for both functions, and you have one plan for the site. You have any thoughts about that, Doug?
No, I'm in full agreement. In fact, with KPIs, I'll hear that this is what the maintenance manager's KPIs are, and this is what the operations manager's KPIs are, and I'll turn to that group and say, shouldn't they be identical?
Yeah.
Right? Shouldn't we both be responsible for maintenance and operations? Right. Yeah. That's what makes the plant run most efficiently, is when everybody has those same goals.
Yeah. And if you don't, well, then that enhances the conflict. And I don't think you want to enhance conflict. You want to minimize it and enhance the cooperation and achieving, some common goals, for all this. One of the comments, another comment I give you, anybody listening, is this. It's really important that you, what I think of as, eliminate the defects that are creating a lot of the maintenance requirements. And if, in generally speaking, if the defects overwhelm your ability to plan and actually implement the schedule properly, then your planning and scheduling system will fail. And by that, I mean, if every week you put together a schedule for next week, but then over the weekend, crap happens, and then every day thereafter crap happens, and eventually your plan and your schedule are just kind of blown out of the water on a daily basis, then maybe you ought to stop and think about, is this working, and why isn't it working? And what if I got rid of, the problems I'm having on startup with the pumps? What if I got rid of the problems I'm having with instruments not being properly calibrated? What if, there's a litany of ifs. So it's really important that you have some process to eliminate the defects that are creating these unexpected maintenance events because they are what Winston LeDay calls unplannable. They just show up. So if you don't stop those, your planning system is not going to be very effective, or your scheduling system, I should say, is not going to be very effective, and you won't have very much time for planning the work to be scheduled. Doug, you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, around the schedule, when it comes to that, the other thing that I tell companies is you have to be realistic. Your schedule has to be built around your current capabilities, right? And that's why measuring OEE is important at the machine level, right? What is this particular line actually capable of doing? If we understand what our OEE is and it's at least consistent, then we should be able to build a schedule that's realistic, that falls within what our capabilities are. When we start dreaming outside of that, and that's what I say, it is nice to dream. It's nice to say, let's have stretch goals, but you should be planning and scheduling within your current capabilities, right? How do I change those capabilities? How do I go from having a 64% OEE to 75 or 80? That gets into what you're talking about, those defects. But while you're in the current state, plan and schedule to your current capabilities.
Right? Yeah. Well, on that topic, and you may disagree with this one, Doug, I'm a Doc Palmer acolyte, if you will. And Doc and I are in sync. Initially, I disagreed with him, frankly, but after some discussion, I think that you should schedule 100% of the available resources for the coming week. Schedule all of it. Don't hold 20% in reserve or 30 or 40 or whatever you think is prudent. Schedule all of it. But, real important, but allow for breaks to the schedule. And, like I said, Doc eventually convinced me that this is the right thing, even though it seems a bit counterintuitive. And that is, when you schedule 100% of your available resources, people expect to do more work, and they actually do more work. The second thing that happens, and that's probably the most important one, the second thing that happens is you actually make conscious decisions about whether or not you need to break that schedule. Because now you don't just say, oh, call in the reserve, the guys that are in waiting. You actually make a decision. Do I need to break the schedule, or can I put that off till next week? How critical is that? How important is that? And so on. And this is the third thing, and it escapes me as I'm sitting right here. I hadn't had much sleep in the past 48 hours because of some issues at home here. Anyways, Doug, I'll turn it to you, and I'll try to think of the third one.
I've been there, done that. Yeah, so that's an interesting concept by Doc. I've read a good part of his book. I can't say I've been through it all. There are times when I have it's one of those things I use as a reference when I have a customer that's struggling with that planning and scheduling end. It's one that I'll refer them to, or I will actually tell them you ought to go to this particular chapter and this particular part in terms of that and how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, the third thing, I did think of it, and that is you look at those things that actually, after you make a conscious decision, you still have other things, where you break the schedule. Then you're going to start to, I hope, group those like a Pareto chart and start to address those in terms of, well, what is it we need to do proactively to actually go back and eliminate the defects that are creating those issues. So I believe that there are lots of advantages in doing what Doc says, in spite of my initial reluctance, counter arguments, whatever you may call it. So you get more work done, and as you get more work done, you have more time to do more work. You make conscious decisions, and you actually begin to think about, how do I eliminate those unplanned events? So anyways, that's the third one. Other thoughts on that, Doug?
No, I get exactly what he's saying. In my terms, when I talk about plan and schedule to your capabilities, I'm more on the operation side, right? If you're struggling to make product and put product out the door, don't promise your customers that you're going to do this or that. when you haven't been able to demonstrate those capabilities ever, right?
Yeah.
So when you do that, then you also put the maintenance schedule in jeopardy, right? By saying we're going to produce X when we're only capable of producing something different, something less than that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, another thing that you might want to consider, not just might, I encourage you strongly to consider, is in each of your equipment files, have a listing of improvement ideas such that the next time you do maintenance, whether it's scheduled or unscheduled, then you pull out those improvement ideas, and while you've got the machine down, do those.
Yeah.
And doing that, at least according to Winston and some work he did with some heavy industrial manufacturers like refiners, you reduce the total number of defects, which is really of utmost importance. You reduce the defects over the course of 3 years by 30 to 40%. Now, what he says is, about 1%, of your maintenance should be based on those improvement ideas.
Yeah.
And you think, well, 1%, that's not much. Yeah, but now think out loud here. Let's suppose I got 1,000 work orders a month. Well, what's 1%? That's 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's 10 a month. Well, shoot, that's 120 a year. Well, shoot, that's 500 over 3, 4, 5 years. Golly, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So it's not an overwhelming task. In fact, it's quite doable if you have a little bit of discipline and put those improvement ideas into your equipment file and pull them out every time you do maintenance on the machine. Now, just one other thought. Where do you get those improvement ideas? Well, go talk to the guys doing the work. Go talk to the operators. Find out what's bugging them. There's a plethora of ideas out there. If you just go ask folks, what's going on? What do you need?
Yeah.
What's bothering you? So I'll quit preaching for a second. Doug, you want to preach?
Well, it goes back to my days as a tradesperson. We called that window of opportunity work, right?
Yeah.
When you're presented with that window of opportunity, what are the things that you can do, especially for those machines that very rarely shut down, right?
Yeah.
We had stuff that sometimes would run 3 to 6 months at a time. And so that window of opportunity work could build up, but those improvement ideas sat in that pile of work, right?
Yeah.
Here's what we ought to do next to improve on this or that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the, planning, what are the things that you think companies struggle with the most in terms of planning work?
Oh, well, defects overwhelming their ability to actually plan and schedule the work, which, they tend to be in a highly reactive situation. Another would be literally inadequate resources in the forms of the number of folks doing the planning and their skill level. One of the things that can happen is, guys that are on high, they see planners staring at a computer screen and they say, well, they're not working. Well, your accountants aren't working either. So you're going to fire them, so just inadequate resources, as you and I and most folks out there would probably know that the standard, if you want to call it that, is have one planner for every 20 maintenance techs, including, in my view, contractors, unless they provide their own.
Right.
But it's kind of a notional figure. Just think about it. Suppose you got very little or no planning, and you got 2 guys, and their wrench time, time actually spent on the tools is 30%. For lack of a better number, let's pick 30. Well, that's the equivalent of about 60% full-time equivalent working. Well, let's suppose you use a planner, suppose you've got 3 guys and they're each about 30%. Well, it takes you up to, equivalent, full-time equivalent, almost a full-time person. Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
suppose you take one of those guys and you make them a planner, and you move the 30% to 50%. Well, now you got a whole person, not just 9/10. And, the planner made it possible to improve the productivity because the parts are ready, the tools are ready, the permits have been issued, all that stuff got done before the work actually started. And their tool time, is actually better than what it would have been if you didn't have that. Now, I'm not suggesting you need one planner for every two people. I'm just saying, don't be dumb and try to limit the number of planners and therefore limit the productivity of the whatever it is, 20, 50, 200 people that you got out there working. Overdo it to get the systems in place, and then you might scale back a little bit as you get those equipment files brought up to speed and the planning process fine-tuned and so on. So that's my fixed opinion, I suppose.
All right. So when I look at it and in talking with planners that I've worked with over the years, the things that they tell me that they struggle with in terms of their process of their job is number one, bill of materials, right? They don't have a good bill of materials within their hierarchy. So they spend way too much of their time searching for parts, right? Even if they have them in their own stock room, right? Yeah. Is it the right one that goes with that particular machine? Is that the right coupling, right? Is that the right pump? Is it the right motor? So that bill of materials and matching up, they seem to spend a lot of time there that can build for inefficiency. The other one that I was kind of surprised at that I've heard by more than half the companies is specialty tools, right? It's not what the guys have in their box, but the stuff outside of that: chain falls, come-alongs, jacks, you name it. The bigger stuff that you would go get out of a tool crib or rent, right? Lifts, ladders, right? They say you can't believe how many jobs we have that are impacted by those where, hey, we've got, 5 half-ton come-alongs or chain falls out there between the 5 or 6 buildings that we're servicing. I need that one for at least 3 days for this job, right? Now somebody else needs it and it's not there, right? Yeah. So those are things they struggle with.
Yeah, another obstacle that is, at least in my experience, is fairly frequent. And before I give you that, I just wanted to make a comment about bill of material. I've been doing this kind of work for 26, 27 years in plants. I've never been to a single plant where when I ask the question, how many of you guys have bills of material on all your equipment? Not one hand has gone up.
Yeah.
Not one out of hundreds of plants. And you're thinking, golly, I can get parts for my old Jeep and they can't find parts for their plant.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And it's one of those things that, if I've said it once, I've said it 5,000 times. It really, the bill of materials should really be part of the capital process, right? When you purchase and install a new asset, that bill of materials should be part of and come into the CMMS system along with that piece of equipment. Should be there before it starts up.
Yeah.
Right. And drawing the line somewhere in the sand and saying, we're going to start doing that, it has to happen. Right.
Yeah. But the other problem I see in quite a few plants is having the permits, the permits being ready. Mm-hmm. You're ready to do the work and you go to do the work and, oh, we didn't know you were coming. Oh, well, we don't have the permit issued. Oh, well, Joe Schmo's not in today. He's the only one that knows how to shut that machine down. Oh, well, and the permitting process in some areas, particularly, chemical plants, refineries, relatively dangerous, highly complex operations, very often needs a real thorough review, analysis, and maybe some streamlining of the process. So those are the big ones that come to mind for me.
So before we push on to something else, I'd like to give people ideas of how do I handle this, right? the bill of materials goes right back to something you said the first time you and I did this together. You have to start somewhere, right? You can't just sit back and complain about it. You have to start somewhere. So I always then fall back to, okay, what's critical? So it goes back to criticality analysis. Start with the critical assets, do your bill of materials there. And I don't care if you do one a month or one a quarter, at least you're making progress, right?
Yeah.
The tool problem that I talked about, the places that have done well with that, they actually make those tools assets. They go on their lists, right? And it's just like having something in a stock room. Okay, so I need a half-ton chain fall for that job. All right, here's the 5 of them that I have. I can see them on my screen as a planner, and here's where they are currently, right? There's currently 2 available, so I can put that in with that job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to have that kind of discipline to make this work.
Yeah. Another comment, what makes a good planner would be another question that comes up. Besides having the skills, that's frequently a problem where people are put into a planner role and they've never done it, never watched anybody do it, haven't been up and kind of apprentice, went to one day course that somebody did,
right?
And now they're a planner. Voila. Yeah, right. Well, that's important. The training and development is important, but my own personal view is that they should be veterans of the kinds of equipment that they're going to be planning the work for.
Yeah.
Because if they're not veterans, they're really guessing about what needs to be done. And they need to be fairly thorough, meticulous. They can't be, sloppy in their work habits. And so veterans have to be thorough, meticulous, knowledgeable. They have to have some training and development on the systems and how to use them. So they have to be fairly good with, computer systems. And they have to be easy to get along with, I guess. They can't spin out or, spin up, maybe is the right word, whenever something disrupts what they've, put down, because it's going to happen a lot. So they have to be somewhat flexible in their attitude and be kind of, expect it and be kind of cheerful, even though they may be disappointed about it. So those are, some of the things that I think are important. Maybe others, Doug. You have any others to throw into that mix?
I think that's a pretty good one. I'm a person that goes the same way. Look, if you need somebody to plan, you need somebody that actually knows that equipment inside and out, how it goes apart, how to put it back together, what components make it up. It really comes down, what materials to use. Is it stainless? Is it steel? Is it galvanized, right? What gasket material? The list goes on and on and on. And unless you have that experience, you're going to make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another way of thinking about all this is they have to be a friendly OCD person.
Yeah.
OCD in the sense they're really, intent on getting it right. But when it doesn't go right, they can't, go crazy. So those are a bit of a, it's a bit of a dichotomy perhaps, or a bit counter indicated.
Yep.
You got to be friendly and easy to get along with and can't let something different stress you out. On the other hand, you need to be OCD. Well, OCD people are naturally stressed out when things don't go exactly a certain way. But if you can find that person that's a bit like that, and I think you've got a better shot at having a good outcome. So one of the questions that often comes up, I think to some folks, is wrench time. I want to measure wrench time. I'm going to see if I won't use the word I was going to use. I want to see if them guys are working. A bunch of slackers, and they'll measure it, and it'll be 30% of. Well, what the hell are they doing with the other 70% of their time? Well, that's not really a question you ought to be asking. The question you ought to be asking is, what's happening during that 70% that stops them from working?
Yeah.
Because that's really the important question. And it's not that they don't want to work. It's that they're, you know, replete. There are numerous obstacles that are stopping them from getting the work done. So if you measure wrench time because you want to know what it is, and I think that's a good thing, but don't do it and then use it as a club to beat people for not working. Use it as an opportunity to find out what's stopping them from doing the work. And if you do that, they're much more likely to be cooperative. They're much more likely to support you because most often, far more often than not, they're frustrated at, like Doug said, not having the parts, not having the tools, not having the permits, not having, just any number of things that stop them from doing the work. That's why they're not working.
All right.
Damn it.
So, Ron, we actually have a couple questions. First one here is, how would you demonstrate your ability to plan your work according to urgency and importance?
Well, I might let you answer that, but the differentiate between urgency and importance.
Yeah, how do you demonstrate
both?
your ability to plan your work according to urgency and importance? So, how do we plan stuff in terms of how urgent or important it is?
Well, when you and I were planning for this, so to speak, you brought up the issue of criticality, right? Having a good, measure or indicator of criticality on the machines and the processes. So I'm going to let you touch on that in just a bit. But I would also say, back to my earlier comment, you got to have one plan. It's a production plan. It incorporates the maintenance plan. And so having some sense about what the importance of whatever the work is to the business in terms of producing quality product on time in full, and the risk if you don't. So to me, that kind of high level philosophical statement ought to drive a lot of the decisions you make about how urgent it is, how important it is. Is it key to satisfying your customers? So I'll turn it back to you on criticality.
All right. So going along with the one plan mantra that you have there, the criticality should be set up and done the same way. It's really a cross-functional exercise so that we all agree on what our most critical assets are, right? And it's at that point that we say, okay, when work comes in, it'll be planned and scheduled based on criticality, with the understanding that some things do change. Sometimes the production schedule changes because we had a machine breakdown, right? And while that machine wasn't our most critical asset because it was down for longer than expected, we're behind on putting product out the door. So if something else went on there, it might get bumped up, right? Those are things that you resolve in your daily meeting between maintenance and operations when we have to break the schedule, like you talked about. That's reality, right? So, but start with criticality and then, use common sense beyond that when it comes to the production schedule, what's important.
Yeah. Want to go back to this wrench time again. The two methods I'm familiar with, there may be others. One is just work sampling, where you put a guy with a clipboard out in the plant, and they look at in 10-minute blocks or 15-minute blocks what people are doing, let's say in the maintenance function. That might be useful. My personal favorite is a DILO, a day in the life of, where you actually bolt yourself to a maintenance technician and you walk around with them all day long. And the purpose isn't to see if they're working. The purpose is to find what's stopping them from getting the work done. And I've done this, and each time I've done it, it's really quite revealing, because you show up and you bolt yourself to a maintenance tech and they don't like you. so you have to say, look, I'm not here to see if you're working. I know you're working. I know you want to work. I'm here to see what's stopping you from doing the work, and I'm here to help you eliminate those things. And they say, yeah, right. So you got to prove it over the course of the day and you go, first of all, you don't have a work order, so you got to wait for your work order. That takes 10, 15 minutes, half an hour. Then you get the work order, you don't have the parts, so you got to go wait in line at the storeroom and wait for that. And then you get out to the machine, you don't have the machine's running, you don't have the permits, hadn't been shut down and locked out and tagged out. And then you put the part on, it's the wrong part. And you go back and get the other part, and then you come back and you finally get it installed. And, when they go to start it up, it trips because the guy that, started it up hadn't started it up in, 6 months, and he forgot the procedure and I'd go back and get it. And then he comes back and so on and so forth. And, one of them, I did it. I think we worked, and I even helped him take the bolts off. He handed me a wrench, said, "Years, don't just stand there." And it took us 20 minutes to take the bolts off and put them back on. And it took 4 hours to get the job done. So, and the rest of that time was spent doing what?
Yeah.
And it wasn't because the guy didn't want to work. So that's just I prefer the DILO, the sampling time. If you do sampling time, again, what you're looking for is what's stopping them from working. You ain't looking to see if they're working. So, all right, I'll get off that horse for a minute.
All right. And question number 2 is, how would you motivate a new worker who seems reluctant or disagrees with my schedule?
Well, I guess first thing I'd do is talk to them about why do they disagree?
Right.
What is it that I don't know that they know that I need to take into account and, act accordingly? In some cases, it might be that, well, they got a good point, but this is more important, and then explain why this is more important, and try to give them some idea about when you're going to get to what they think is more important. Or in some cases, you might actually change your mind, with the, I didn't know that,
Yeah.
look.
The ability to take the time to talk and listen, right? And listen being the more important of the two, right? Especially, I shouldn't even say especially with new people. It's with all people. It's very difficult sometimes to, you can hang a tag on somebody that they complain because they're new, right? They might be complaining because of their experience somewhere else that they saw the same thing happening, right? And so,
or you might not have trained them properly.
right.
So
it's one of those things that you got to take the time, you got to listen. The worst thing you can do is take a person that's willing to speak up and get them to the point where they never speak, right? That's not what you need to do in a lot of cases. So, yeah, it's one of those things, listen and then educate, right? The person may be totally off base or they might have a point, but you aren't going to know until you have that conversation.
And you might just educate yourself about things you didn't know.
Yeah.
By listening. So, all
right. So we've kind of covered the quirks of the planning side. Now let's talk a bit about scheduling. What are the things that cause the most heartburn when it comes to schedule, and why do companies struggle with it?
Well, I think disruptions to the schedule created by changes to the production plan or defects coming in overnight that create a disruption. Not having an adequate planning system, where it's easy to access the data, easy to access the part numbers, easy to find information that you need for the plans. Those are the things that come immediately to mind. What I'm going to turn it back to you. What thoughts do you have on that?
Well, that's when we were pre-planning, where I talked about criticality. I think that's the most important aspect of it. And the thing that I think that I see that most companies struggle with is they try to accept a criticality ranking that's like 1 through 5 or A, B, C, D, E. There's not enough range to it, right? In terms of criticality, one of the things that I was taught that I'm a firm believer in, and it was Andy Page that taught me this, was your criticality ranking range should be the square root of the number of assets that you have, right?
Wow. That's a new one for me.
Yeah. So
You got 1,000
what
assets,
that,
square root of 1,000 is 100. So the
right?
range, wow, goodness. How do you
10,000.
manage that? Sorry, I meant to
How do
interrupt
you,
you. Go ahead.
yeah. How do you manage that? It's really a type of thing that you, number one, have to do the walk down to make sure you have a good listing of what your assets are, and then your spreadsheet would tell you what the number is, right? And then from there, you go through the square root and you say, okay, here's what our criticality range is. If we got 10,000 assets, our
Yeah.
our range would be 0 to 100. Is that correct? Did I get that right? So
Yeah, you did.
that gives you a broader spectrum, right, of what's important and what's not so important, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. You're going to find with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you're going to have far too much work that the ranking is equal. Right. You're going to have a whole bunch of stuff that's ranked 1 or 2. Right. Some stuff at 3, and then typically what happens with the lower ranked stuff when planners see that, oh, it's a 4 or 5. Oh, should I even bother with it? So now what happens? Everything you've got in your pile is 1, 2, or 3, right? And you
Yep.
got 10,000 assets out there. How do you
Yep.
know what to do now? Then it becomes an argument, right?
Yeah. The same thing happens, by the way, not just criticality ranking, but it's a similar kind of concept is when you have the work priorities,
Yep.
1 through 5.
Yep.
And if you don't have good, at least good definitions for what a 1 is, what a 5 is, and so on, what you're going to wind up with is everything's a 1. Because people figured, well, if I don't put 1 on there, nobody's going to care. And it'll never get done. And so, and in fact, that happened one operation I was at. I said, how much of your work is whatever, emergency or urgent? 70, 80% of it. And I said, well, that's not realistic. At times you might think it is based on that operations behavior. But anyways, so if you don't have some criteria, some standards, and in your case, range or a process for allocating that, then you're going to run into all kinds of conflict in setting up your planning and scheduling. Go ahead, Doug.
All right. The other piece that I see is they try to use the planner as the scheduler, and that rarely works. All you're doing is frustrating a person, right? The planner's job is to get the job ready, get the kit ready, and then press a button that says the job is ready to be scheduled.
Yeah.
Done. Right.
Yeah.
Now the scheduler takes over.
Yeah. One other thing that you just prompted me to just thought about is that if in a large operation, I think the planners, if you have, say, several, say 5, I think all 5 of those guys should report to a single supervisor. They should not be each one reporting to the maintenance area maintenance manager, area maintenance superintendent individually. They all should, now they should be allocated maybe or assigned to an area,
right?
But the guy running that area can't give them what instructions on what they do day to day. They can give them work to plan and work to schedule, but they can't pull them off a job, out of their planning role and put them on a job. They can't have them expedite parts. Well, that's just inappropriate in my view.
Yep.
The superintendent manages that and interfaces with those area guys and then makes sure that the work is properly planned, that the parts are available and that sort of thing. If you do the former, that is each planner reports to the area guy, you'll get inconsistent processes, you get inconsistent, work planning and scheduling. You just get a lot of inconsistencies, and some days they won't be planning, they're going to be working because somebody didn't show up. So I think in large organizations, especially small ones, well, you got to be multitasking. You're just going to have to live with that and sort it through in a small organization. So your thoughts, Doug?
All right, I'm with you on that. The question that I have next in terms of scheduling is, what's best practice, right? Should they, have a scheduling meeting once a week, and then something early every day in case there's any revisions or breaks that need to be done? What's best practice there?
Well, it's probably in the eyes of the beholder, but if I'm the boss, I'm probably going to have a scheduling meeting, every Wednesday, so that I have time to, make sure we got the parts, do some fine tuning, get that all lined up by Friday, before, the weekend when things tend to slow down relative to all this. Other folks may think Thursday. I don't really have a strong view other than if you don't pick Wednesday and I'm the boss, you're going to have to explain it to me, and maybe I'll go with you.
All right. And so then is the scheduler involved in the daily plan as well?
Well, the scheduler has, I think so. I mean, in the sense of they have to understand, how to allocate the resources that are available the following week. So they have to have good understanding of the amount of work to be done and notionally what's required in all that. So I would certainly think so. You can't just dump it in their lap and hope they understand it without participating in all the nuances that occur in that planning meeting.
Okay. And you had what the ideal planner looks like, where they came from. Do you have any opinions on the scheduler?
Well, I would think they have a similar background. They may not have to be as experienced as the planner, because they may not be putting together the work details, but they have to understand it well enough to be able to, allocate the resource and make sure that they have the right resource assigned to the right job, as opposed to just randomly picking, mechanics and, millwrights and electricians and so on. So I would think they would have, although not as intense a background, something similar to that. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to tell you, that's a job that requires really thick skin.
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry.
Right.
There is
because
that.
You can't be a person that says the world must look exactly like this.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Because that schedule is going to change from time to time. Right. And just when you think you got it perfect, something else comes up. Right.
Yep.
So it needs to be a person with thick skin, but yet somebody that's very that knows how to make good decisions in a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Right?
And some consultancies out there, they'll say, well, you need to schedule down to the, some real fine point, and if something changes, you need to go back and run that through the system again. I just think that's a waste of time. I think, if you schedule something in a given week, but something happens Tuesday when you had it scheduled, but you can reslot it to do it Thursday, I think that's fine. I would give you credit for getting it, finishing it on the schedule, to give you some flexibility, because there is quite a bit of variation, perturbations, and so on in any operation. So I'm not one who tries to calculate that to the nth degree and then try to hold to that nth.
Right.
That's an exercise in extreme frustration.
I don't mean to smile and chuckle too much, but my answer to that, when I talk to people about it and they get frustrated, is I say, look at your doctor and look at your dentist. How often do you go that you walk in exactly on time and you sit in that chair or get put on the table, right? Do you think they purposely want you to wait for 40 minutes?
Yeah,
Sometimes.
Right? They had it all scheduled.
They did have it all scheduled, and they hoped that it would work out, and something else came up, right? And and you have to sit there and in your mind say, it's part of their job, and right, I have to just kind of relax and wait my turn, right?
Yeah,
and sometimes that happens at work as well.
Yeah, if I were in there with him, I wouldn't want him saying, "Well, I'm done now. Your time's up. Get out." Unless it's a psychiatrist, and then I got a different kind of problem, I suppose.
But and then, oh, by the way, the maintenance person can't try to rush that job out the door. Right. Yeah. Because he realizes he's 40 minutes behind.
Right.
It's one of those things that it's part of daily life, and it really does require a special person to be the scheduler. Somebody that can deal with that type of anxiety every day, right? And let it go. And at the same time, a good communicator, somebody that's able to, okay, it's spur of the moment. All right, here's the two people I got to call because this isn't happening now. What are we going to do next? Right. So,
all right. I think I've covered all the points that I had on my little cheat sheet. I don't know.
All right.
Have you?
It's a good day here. So, it's been great to see you again, Ron, and to talk about things, and hopefully the audience, when they see that, maybe they'll come up with a couple more questions for us, and we'll address those at some other date and time.
Yeah, happy to do that. I wish you well with your dental activities there.
So one last question for you that I'm sure our listeners often have when they take a look and watch these. You have that flag behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Where's it from? What's the significance?
It's my father's. All right. He was on the first wave on Leyte and on the second wave in the Battle of Okinawa.
Oh, wow.
And Iwo Jima gets a lot of press. The Bulge gets a lot of press. There were far more people killed in the Battle of Okinawa than either of those. It was an incredibly difficult fight. So
I can't imagine.
Yeah, that's my dad. He was Purple Heart, twice decorated for heroism. Just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Well, God bless him.
He was so kind and sweet.
Thanks for sharing that story. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All right, Ron. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and send us any questions that by whatever means appropriate, and we'll try to answer them at some point. Everybody have a good rest of the week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you both for another great conversation. And on behalf of the entire team here at MOBIUS Connect, thank you for our wonderful audience for joining us today, too. Just a reminder, you can see past episodes of Connect Conversations on YouTube, and we will share the link to subscribe on our YouTube channel in an email following this webinar. Be on the lookout as new episodes typically air every other Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you're interested in engaging with other industry professionals or would like to participate in the industry's live feed and forums on MOBIUS Connect, you can visit www.mobiusconnect.com to create your profile. And be sure to follow us on social media at MOBIUS Connect to stay up to date with the latest community happenings. And if you have any questions at all, please email our MOBIUS Connect team at info@mobiusconnect.com. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.